Right, all council meetings apply on the muting and unmuting.
Like we won't have a problem with that on this meeting. All right, so Lacey, are we ready to go? I have 6 o'clock.
You're live.
Okay, great. All right, welcome everyone to this special emergency meeting. We've got a kind of pro forma issue to talk about, as well as some other things, but Judy, let's go ahead and call the roll.
Indeed. Hausch.
I'm here.
Stokes.
Here.
Krieger.
Here.
McQueen will not be able to join the meeting this evening, and Laura Curlis is en route. We also have present Village Manager Josue Salmarón and Solicitor Brianne Parcels.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Judy. And Judy, do you want to, since Marianne's not here, do you want to do the petitions and communications real quick before we get into the legislation?
You bet. They all are in regard to the mask requirement or declaring a pandemic state of emergency. They are all in favor of doing so. And we from downtown business owners Molly Lundy, Jamie Sharp, Marshall Walgren, Lindsay Burke, Matt Kirk, Anna Burke, and Ryan Stinson. We also heard from Corey Whitaker.
Okay, thanks so much again, Judy. And so we're going to hop into the legislation piece of this. And as I mentioned, we've got two items. The first item is Resolution 2021-31. And Judy, we can do that by title only.
This is authorizing the village manager to execute the participation agreement for the One Ohio subdivision settlement.
All right, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. So I believe Brianne's going to talk about.
Yes, just very briefly. The resolution before you was actually drafted as part of the One Ohio specific opioid proposed settlement. If you recall, shortly after I was appointed, council authorized joining the settlement litigation with the Purdue Pharma bankruptcy. This is different because this is specific to Ohio and the Attorney General's negotiated settlement for local government subdivisions with distributors in the opioid litigation, which is a completely different case. So the agreement was negotiated by Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost and the attorneys for several Ohio subdivisions. This has been going on since at least 2019, but the village did not participate at that time. So the Municipal League sent out an alert August 3rd and said, hey, if you have not signed on, you now have the opportunity. But if you do not sign on, you're going to be losing out on any part of the negotiated settlement. So each local government has to decide whether to sign on to the settlement by, they wanted it by August 6th, but they said no later than August 13th. So that's why we are having an emergency, because the participation form is something that the village manager can't just sign because there is funding involved. It has to be done through an act of council because it's involving litigation. So that's why this resolution is before you tonight. If you have any questions, I've put the links in the resolution on where people can go for more information. Specifically, if you look at the proposed potential settlement amounts, the village stands to get anywhere between $20,000 and $29,000 from the settlement if it goes through as proposed.
All right, thank you, Brianne. And yeah, I guess, so in short, we have to pass this resolution if we want to be included in getting some of the disbursement for addressing the opioid crisis that these drug companies, I guess in this case, J&J, have caused. So any questions or comments before we vote?
I have a quick question, Brian. This is Kevin. Brianne, I know you had talked about some of the links that have answers to questions, but I would suspect that knowing what the total number of or percentage of municipalities that are eligible to join this action, are we at very close to that 95%, or is it too soon to say?
It's too soon to say. But again, the Municipal League sent out the alert on August 3rd to everyone, including the municipalities that did not previously participate. I mean, we're talking everyone from the largest counties to the very tiny village of Zor, which stands to get about $330. So it's everyone is listed on this 110-page spreadsheet. Every single political subdivision that's eligible to participate has been contacted and notified that if you want to sign on, August 13th is your deadline.
Okay, thank you much.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right, if not, Judy, let's go ahead and call the roll.
All right, Krieger,
Yes.
Stokes,
Yes.
Hausch.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, so now we're going to move into our second topic for tonight that I think will be a little bit more involved, but very timely and important, and that's Resolution 2021-32. And Judy will go ahead and read that in by title only as well.
All right, this is declaring a pandemic state of emergency in the village of Yellow Springs, Ohio.
Okay, can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to make a few comments and then I'm going to hand it over to Lisa Krieger, who is has the most expertise on council for sure, being a nurse, master degreed, and really on top of understanding what this is about. But I want to emphasize a few things. First of all, being that Josue and I continue to be on top of proper COVID crisis protocols. And as we have known for, over a year and a half, this is a constantly changing situation that we have to be on top of. And I hope that most folks appreciate that Yellow Springs has been in the forefront of addressing these issues, being as proactive as we can, and really taking a lead on safety measures and whatnot. So Josue and I have talked a lot about this, and we realized that it was important to potentially take some action, which is why we're talking about this tonight. I think a couple other things I want to emphasize are the fact that we are majorly concerned about some of the changes that Lisa's going to go into. And while 2 months ago, we got the sense that the majority of folks, especially in looking at our downtown businesses, felt that the personal choice route made sense. We have gotten a lot of feedback in the last day or two that it may make more sense for our community to revisit a mask mandate, certainly for indoors and maybe looking at other things as well. And so this is something that we wanted to make sure that we addressed as soon as possible. The other piece I do want to highlight, because I know some folks, both in letters, and I saw that Nick Gaskins is on the meeting or in the meeting, is related to street fair. And so I do want to emphasize that this is another thing that we've been proactive about. Josue and I discussed and delivered a message that I felt was important, that it may not be a good idea to have an October street fair given all the changes that have happened. Marshall Walgren pointed out that either today or yesterday, New Orleans, with the Jazz Fest that's on the same weekend, has canceled that. And so we are listening to the feedback. We understand the concerns. But I do want to also highlight that one thing that has been consistent throughout is that the village and, by extension, our police team are always there to support whatever our local businesses and our community in general need. That has never changed. But we understand that based on what's going on with the numbers, that we may need to shift to going back to a mandate and making sure that there's a real focus on the message that we want to send to folks that are visiting our community. So with that, Lisa, I'm going to pass it on to you to talk a little bit more about the specifics.
Yeah, I mean, this is so very disappointing. And I mean, none of us want to be where we are right now, but it's a very harsh reality. We've always been saying this is a nasty bug. We've always said that, but the Delta variant is really a very serious variant. As I'm certain that many of you have heard, it's by far and away more contagious. And in fact, interestingly, I was at Ohio State at a medical facility yesterday, and they had a sign that said no cloth masks allowed. That at this point, if we're really going to, I mean, I'm not going to take us down this rabbit hole, but the recommendation is to wear a KN95, a form of, an N95, or to wear both a paper mask and a cloth mask. So this is a really, really serious and extremely contagious virus. And the reality is, if you just look at Greene County, we're only at 51.5% fully vaccinated, and just a little higher than that have only had one vaccine thus far. But we know, because we're a destination community, even throughout this whole situation, that we can't just look to Greene County. And Greene County is at high risk right now. It's an orange color. The majority of the state is orange. Some counties are red. Montgomery County is very, very close to going red. And there's a lot of people in Yellow Springs that visit from Montgomery County. I have a recommendation for the practice of council, and that is that we meet remotely anytime the infection rate is more than 10 per 100,000 people, 10 infection for 100,000. Hold on a second. And that's the point at which it drops below being high risk. I think it will be helpful for us to have a standard that we can watch and see how those numbers go. That does follow some more progressive states who are setting thresholds in that range. I also would recommend that the mask mandate, and while it's easier to say just indoors, if you can't physically distance, you should still be wearing a mask outdoors too. And I know that the enforcement of that can be tricky, but if it were I or someone who I didn't want to have get sick, when it gets crowded downtown, you should stay masked up and try to maintain as much as you can physical distance. And if you're not vaccinated, you should really seriously avoid having contact with people in groups, even though we're all, very much over this. It's very disappointing and dangerous. And I'd also like to point out that I know 3 people personally here in Yellow Springs who are sick, who've lost sense of taste and smell and are fully vaccinated. So the variant is breaking through the vaccine. So because of those reasons, I'm strongly and sadly in support of going back into this mandate.
Thank you, Lisa. Judy, I wanted you to share just some feedback that you got from a couple of our commission members that kind of, I think, connects to what Lisa ended with.
Yeah, I had sent out queries to Planning Commission and BZA members to ask them how they felt about meeting in person with masks versus by Zoom if in fact council were to pass this measure this evening. And most folks said completely fine with Zoom, but I did have one BZA member and one planning commission member say they did not want to meet in person at all, that they both of those separate people had friends who had become ill, and they were just unwilling to make that sacrifice as volunteers.
And weren't both those friends vaccinated?
Yes, they were.
Okay, thank you. Colin, since you're on the line, Chief Altman, love to hear any input from you. And then Kevin, you're up next.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I echo what Lisa says. I mean, this is definitely a unexpected, well, I guess it is kind of expected if you were paying attention, but expected and unfortunate situation that is, we have to remember, it is still primarily affecting those who chose not to be vaccinated or weren't able to be. I think, an indoor mask mandate makes sense at this point. We're not going to see it from the state, certainly, unfortunately, not at this point, with the politics around it. Outdoor, I agree with Lisa's points, especially when it gets crowded. The downside is I know the nightmare it is for the police department to try and enforce that. But I think we've got to take the steps necessary to protect people and be consistent, along all the businesses and other places downtown. That'll make life easy. And, as organizations, the village, the township, we just have to continue to urge everybody who hasn't done so to be vaccinated. That is the only thing. Those of us who are vaccinated, more than likely, if I were to get a breakthrough infection, it's going to be very minimal. But, if I talk to my friends in the hospital, 98% of the people in the hospital currently with COVID are unvaccinated. So, and that's holding steady. So, but we need to take steps because our hospitals are getting to that point of being overwhelmed. They're at 94% capacity. And a lot of that other capacity is just unfilled beds because they don't have the staff to do it. I think it's time to be aggressive, as you saw I'm sure you're aware, all three major hospital systems in the Dayton area are now requiring their staff, visitors, students, vendors, everyone to get the vaccine, whether they want to or not. We've taken that stance as well. All our staff will have to be vaccinated. The mask mandate just makes sense indoor. Outdoor, who knows? It's just a pain for the police, I know. But if you think about a busy weekend or if there is a street fair, it makes sense to have that in place for people to at least be safe.
All right, thanks. I'm sorry, go ahead.
One other thing I think we just need to remind people too, here in Yellow Springs, we're a very, a touchy-feely community. Now is not the time for the 3-minute hug in Tom's when you see someone you haven't seen in a while. We love each other, but we can love each other from a distance, just to be on the safe side, because there are, we don't know who's vaccinated, who's not. And you just got to be careful and protect yourself and protect your friends. So.
All right. Thanks for that, Chief Altman. And
you're welcome.
That does remind me that one of those two individuals that Judy referred to, their friend who was vaccinated, also got infected at an outdoor event. So, again, it is breaking through, at least to some extent. The other thing I don't want to forget is we're trying to get our kids back to school. And I don't even want to talk about all the crazy states and what they're, not doing and preventing people from doing. But Kevin, let's jump to you. I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Brian. I am 112% in favor of a mask mandate. At the college, we're instituting soon we'll be instituting a mask mandate and a vaccination requirement. And that might mean that I lose a team member from one of the teams that I'm responsible for. But I'm okay with that. I think this is serious enough, and it's not a matter of opinion. We've seen this movie before. When the first 2 or 3 previous waves of COVID-19 came through. But the movie we saw before, in comparison, was perhaps in black and white, and now we're in Technicolor, 3D, 4K. I mean, this is much more serious than anyone could have imagined. when we thought that having a vaccine would keep you safe 100%, I mean, that was a nice, comfortable place for us to be in. But when we're now seeing the level of breakthroughs and the number of illnesses for unvaccinated people, when we first had the mask mandate, I know it was a tough road to hoe, if you will, for the police and whatnot. But I just think every corner of the village government and everyone else needs to be 100% on board with this. We don't have to be apologetic about it. This is a requirement. And Lisa, what you just said about non-cloth masks, I mean, that's shocking, but I think that is indicative of what knowledgeable people have concluded, because I guess what I'm hoping to hear is the folks that are getting these breakthrough infections, like what are they doing that I'm not doing? I mean, what can I do more? Is there a way for you to even avoid getting the virus if you're exposed to it? Again, like I said, we thought we were in a safe place with masking and vaccinations. So this, I think, is at such a level where, again, we don't have to drag our feet. We don't have to be apologetic. We don't have to look for easy ways out or make any excuses. We are taking this action to save lives, plain and simple. And for anyone who does not want to live, work, or shop in Yellow Springs because we have the mandate, I would submit that we'll be okay with you after you come back later. Again, I don't want to be seen facetious about this thing, but it is serious enough. And I appreciate the stories that we share about folks that we know, but we ought to just pay attention to what's being shared, at a governmental or at a national level. And so the point I'm making is some people take it more serious when they get it, or a family member gets it, or somebody that personally gets it. Let's not wait for that. Let's just take it serious because we know it's serious now. I don't have to know you personally, but I know folks are getting ill and dying from this. And this is much more serious than what we've had to go through before. So we need to treat it much more seriously. And I appreciate the action that we're planning to take to address this thing up front. And I think, Brian, you alluded to, the state, the county, we are, it's not about us being more liberal, but being small and nimble and really depending on the science. And we don't have the political pressures that the governor might be having to deal with. So that being the case, I say move forward. Let's get this done as quickly as possible and do what we can do and lead as an example to the rest of the village residents. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, and that does remind me, Senate Bill 22, reflecting like our, supermajority Republican, state representatives who are basically limiting what the governor can do, which is really disappointing. I think the other thing, Kevin, that you reminded me of is that, we do need to think about, safety first. And I think that's what we've always led with. And so it makes a lot of sense that we're looking at this now. I saw Chief Carlson came on, and Chief, I know that you missed a little bit of the beginning of the conversation. But one of the things I emphasized is that the police team has always been there to help with any difficulties that our business owners and others are having. And I don't know if you want to speak to that further.
Sorry, Brian, you should be able to unmute yourself.
There we go.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody, and sorry I'm late. So I'm in agreement. I think one thing that I've been proud of is if you look at Yellow Springs and the decisions that have taken place in relation to the state and elsewhere, we've always been ahead of the game. I have to be straightforward. We are understaffed. We've been extremely busy. So I do ask for patience in these reports and calling the police. But, we are a pretty well-oiled machine regarding the situation, so we can jump right in as needed.
All right, thanks, Chief. All right, so I am going to allow for questions and comments, but Josue, I want to pass it to you next just to talk about what kind of actions you're contemplating, assuming that we pass this resolution.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, Lisa and Kevin, for your messages. I think it's important that we're having this conversation. I know Brian made references to how often we've discussed this. We've been monitoring, as we said we would 2 months ago, that we would be monitoring this closely and take action if and when the time came, and this is where we are. So what's next for us? Should council pass this resolution enacting a local emergency? We have discussed updating new signs. We're probably going to replace some of the hand sanitizer stations and look to maybe even add new ones because they've been vandalized and we've had some challenges with them. So we need to make upgrades there. We're also talking about a mass marketing messaging. I think we need to put our visitors, get the information out and what's expected of them. And so a lot of marketing and also the hand sanitizer, new signage. Brian Carlson, police chief, referenced what we'll do from the enforcement. We ask for some patience. We'll be out there. We also ask for the business owners to not hesitate if they need assistance. This is something that what we appreciate and want their assistance in helping enforce this. They don't have to take it upon themselves. They can call us and say, which is what the expectations are in their place of business.
All right, thanks, Josue. And I think that also underscores, if we pass this resolution declaring an emergency, I think a couple things. I really like what Lisa highlighted about pegging it to the numbers. And we will certainly be following up on this at our meeting next Monday, where we may talk about some of the other issues that have come up, like requiring vaccinations and whatnot. But I think the other piece is that we want to make sure that we're engaged in messaging in a way that's clear and proper. So thanks for that, Josue. I see that Megan Bachman has her hand up. So Megan, you can go ahead and we'll unmic you.
Brian, given the number of folks, we just allow folks to unmute themselves. So
okay,
they can unmute themselves. That way we don't.
Great. Okay, so Megan, you're on.
Great. Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. This first question, I actually have two questions. One is for Brian. You mentioned that you had heard previously that most downtown business owners were not in favor of a mask mandate. I guess I'm wondering if you have any kind of documentation or if you could share more about that. And then this second question is about the numbers that you're going to be using to peg remote meetings to. 10 per 100,000 seems extremely low. I'm not even actually sure that Greene County went below that during this recent lull. On July 8th, when cases were as low as they were in Ohio, at the lowest point, it was 19.2 cases per 100,000 over a 2-week period. And I'm wondering if something like 50 was what Governor DeWine originally pegged his, that he would lift his restrictions at that point. That's where we were around between July 22nd and 29th. So anyway, just right now, of course, in Greene County, we're at 177, and 125 at the state. So just curious about that number and where that's going to land. But thank you so much.
Thank you. So the second question I'll let Lisa respond to. The first question, we have a variety of letters which Judy can pull out and share. And I will say that several business owners that asked us to make it a choice as to whether the business wanted to have a mask requirement or not have changed their position on that. And so I'm not going to name specific individuals or businesses, but that is documented. I'll be honest, we have gotten feedback from about 10 downtown businesses, all of which are saying they would like the village to back them up with a mask mandate, indoors. And so, I mean, I think that's a pretty significant number. We don't have an official, poll. And I welcome that. I mean, I know that, we've got a downtown business group now that's pretty active. So we're doing our best just to gauge. But we had a lengthy discussion at a prior meeting where we talked about the choice issue. We got some feedback. I think one thing that has not changed, as I mentioned at the beginning of this discussion, was that we are always there to support the decision of the business. But we, I think, have heard enough to recognize that having a village mandate will support those businesses in those decisions more. I mean, as a side note, I mean, it doesn't change the prior protocol that if a business doesn't want to enforce that mandate, we, have never during the pandemic required a business to do that. So I think what's been, again, consistent is that we've always been ready and willing to back up those decisions. But anyway, I personally am convinced that enough of our local businesses want something more official again. Lisa, do you want to talk about the number thing?
Yeah, sure. So I follow 3 different sites, and they have different even color scales, which is why we're red with CDC versus on covidactnow.org, because one just has 4 and the other has 5 and cuts it a little tighter. I mean, I can totally be had for what we set the threshold, where we set the threshold, if in fact we need to set a threshold. But what I am confident about is that right now the numbers are going up, and I feel as long as we're high risk or red, depending on which scale you look at, we should not be meeting in person. I just feel that we should not be. I think we should stay remote. So, I mean, if it's better to just say if we're red or high, if that's better than a number of new infections per total, because my challenge is that we are not on an island here in Yellow Springs, not even with Greene County, and surrounding counties are also placing us at risk. Colin, what do you think?
I think it makes sense to tie. I mean, I like having a threshold because it just makes it clear for you guys and other bodies and the public. My recommendation or my suggestion would be to tie it to the CDC's actual map, and I think Brian shared that in the chat, that if our county goes above yellow, which it significantly is at this point, that's when the CDC says to start indoor masking, orange and red. So we still have a lot of space. So I would tie it to that and say, once you're above, what do they call yellow? Moderate. Because I don't know if we'll ever get to below, the numbers for moderate transmission are pretty low. But I don't know if we're going to get to that anytime in the near, in the near future, unless we see a mass vaccination effort, from people. But I would say, orange or red, definitely remote, mask mandates in effect indoors, and whatever other kind of actions there may be. And that's just consistent with what the CDC is saying. And yes, I know someone's going to say, well, that changes all the time. But science changes and science evolves, and we know that. So,
and the resolution does exactly that. It says that the any time that it's substantial or high transmission rate, the pandemic emergency is in effect, and that the village manager has to update council at least weekly based on that 7-day moving average of transmission.
Perfect.
And the bottom line is we're back at the numbers where we were in like October, November 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Trending up. So this is good.
Yeah, sorry, Lisa. Did I end? Yeah. I mean, sadly, the other thing, and Chief Carlson kind of alluded to it, is the challenges that I think everybody understands that we face with the enforcement piece. And, one of those is, we've had people come to council meetings declaring, I'm not vaccinated, I'm not going to wear a mask. And it becomes a challenge, I'm not sure that we're going to forcibly remove somebody from a room. So it makes a lot more sense in those kinds of situations, probably to just tie it to this threshold. So I appreciate that feedback. I also just got a text and from a local business owner. I do want to emphasize what I think I said earlier that they might not have heard, which is that, I am leaning towards we put the mandate back in place, but we understand, as before, business owners made a choice about whether they were going to actively enforce these or not, and we never forced a business owner to enforce those mandates. Okay, so this has been a great discussion. I will again emphasize that Monday's council meeting, that's August 16th, we will be drilling down more on thresholds and things like that. That's, I think that's the next step. But if there are other questions or comments from citizens, we're happy to entertain those. Okay, so I see Valerie. Go ahead and unmic and all right. Okay.
Yes, hi. Thank you for everything you all have discussed tonight. I am in complete support of everything you're all saying. And I want to suggest that part of what the Village of Yellow Springs does is also put out signs that specifically give the details around the Delta variant, as in people who have been vaccinated are ending up sick. They may not be counted because they aren't ending up in the hospital, but they are sick and they're spreading it. Children are ending up in the hospital, and the symptoms of the Delta variant are different from the original. So we are now facing something different. And informing people through signs throughout town, also just in the residential neighborhoods, very useful. So I'm putting out that plea that you include that in part of the changes that we're making, because what we all want is the same common goal. We all want to live through this and be healthy. And we just need to take a few steps, and we have the science that backs it, and we've got the warnings, and we can come through this and thrive if we put our heads together and we do the right thing, as in include information for everyone, not just for sure that everyone should get vaccinated, but even taking more precarious steps. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. And I appreciate that comment in particular about why things are different with the Delta variant. So yeah, great point. Any other questions or comments? And I see Laura Curlis is here. I'm glad you were able to join in, Laura. I know you've missed a lot of the discussion, but if there's any points that you want to highlight, yeah. This would be a good time.
One thing about Zoom meetings is the irony of ironies is I went to council chambers and couldn't get in on a council meeting. I had to come home and get on Zoom. So I'm just saying that I'm all for having Zoom meetings from now on. I understand. I've done my own reading about the Delta variant and its effects, and I guess my only issue is I'm fine with going back to mandating the masks indoors, but I'm not going to be in favor of anything out of doors. So that's just where I am. So I would like to remove 660.10 from the resolution.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Okay, and again, I do want to emphasize the letters that we've received, the phone calls, the texts. I believe all council members have been privy to, and we appreciate that feedback. So I am not seeing any other folks wanting to question or comment. So Judy, I think we're ready to, oh, wait, I saw a hand up. Dino. You can go ahead and mic off.
Yeah, real quick question. With the mandates, I know you guys didn't talk about it, or I may have not heard it. Were you talking about anything about limiting the amount of people inside businesses again?
We have not specifically talked about that, but I think that, do you have thoughts about that?
No, I kind of want to just leave it up to you guys to see what your thoughts were, and just give, again, I think when it comes back to that same discussion we had before, give us some guidance, and then we can enforce whatever the enforcement is. It makes it easier. It doesn't make us be the police, if you will, for lack of better words. If you give us the guidance, we can take it and run with it.
Yep, thank you. So I'm going to say that I'm going to let that discussion play out between Josue and Chief Altman and Chief Carlson. And that can be something that we can talk about at Monday's council meeting. I'm not prepared to drill down on some of those things tonight. Josue, were you going to say something?
I think that's very appropriate, Brian, that Chief Altman and Carlson and I will get together and discuss what would be good parameters. We have a good basis for a recommendation for Monday's meeting, which would be that when we did have a state emergency, it was 50% of the occupancy. So we'll come back to council with a recommendation.
Okay, sounds good. All right, anything else? Okay, so Laura, did you want to make a motion?
Yeah, I move to strike the reference to 660.10 from the resolution.
Okay.
Can I just, I'm looking online and Brianne, can you just check this? Because I'm seeing 60.10 as a sidewalk obstruction, but 60.16 B3 is specifically
Is the outdoor, right?
Yeah.
660
I think, both of them then, and B3.
Okay, because 660.10 gives the village manager the authority to say, we're clearing our sidewalks, we're not allowing people to set up on our sidewalks because we're in a pandemic protocol situation.
There's no, as far as I know, there's not one single documented case in the whole world of transmission out of doors.
As far as you know, but we've just had anecdotal discussion that there have been people in the village that have said that's how they caught it.
Oh, and how did they know?
Well, okay.
And that doesn't make a state of emergency.
Okay, so Brianne, can you give us some clarity around what, I guess, the two things now Laura is motioning to strike so that we can, I guess, make a proper decision? Again, I'd rather these things be hashed out at Monday's council meeting. But since Laura's made the motion, what are the two things that we would be striking out?
Well, 660.10 has been on the books since, I believe, the 2004. So it deals with sidewalk obstructions and that no person shall basically block the sidewalk. And then 660.16 was what we passed last year, which is basically that masking is required when there's a pandemic emergency declared by council. Masking is required indoors and on public property. So indoors in the central business district and then on village-owned property. There are certain exemptions, but during any pandemic emergency declaration by council, all persons in the central business district and on village-owned properties shall cover their mouths and noses with a facial covering when inside any indoor public place, when waiting in line to enter an indoor public place, or when outdoors in public places if physical distancing is not possible.
And I think that's really important because Laura, one of the things before you speak, I mean, one of the things that has been highlighted is, references to street fair and the fact that our sidewalks get packed. So I don't want that to be lost in the shuffle, there's the qualification of when you cannot distance because there are so many people downtown. Go ahead, Laura.
Well, I mean, we're not talking about canceling street fair, are we?
We're not talking about that right now, but it is.
Okay, great. So that's why I think Brian, I read it the way you just did. It's wearing masks when physical distancing is not possible. So to me, that means obviously when you're more than 6 feet away from somebody out of doors, you don't have to wear a mask. Right? Okay. That's why I limited my motion to 660.10. I'm saying strike it from the resolution, not get rid of it as an ordinance. Do you see what I mean? Because in the resolution, you've tied it to, we think that transmission is going to happen just because somebody is vending on the street. I'm not about that at all. So get rid of it out of this resolution only is what I'm saying.
Okay, so Laura, can you clarify the motion? Because
motion to strike the reference to 660.10 in the resolution.
Which is the one about street vendors needing to mask?
Right. No, so what I'm reading, how I'm reading it is it would give the police the ability to make people who are dealing with street vendors mask up, or street vendors, unless they can't physically distance from people, then they ought to wear a mask.
Can I clarify just because?
Yeah, try. Yeah.
I think the section that Laura is referring to not wanting to include is in C of 660.10. It says no person shall put merchandise, goods, or material on the sidewalk so as to obstruct pedestrian traffic, except for a reasonable time if they're unloading or unloading. In no case should the obstruction remain on the sidewalk for more than 1 hour. No heavy goods. It's basically you can't block the sidewalk or congregate unlawfully without a permit. It's those general policing guidelines for things downtown that I think Laura's just saying she doesn't want connected with the masking issue.
Yeah, so why is it in the resolution?
Because that's under the village manager's powers to clear the sidewalks when there's a pandemic.
Yeah, no, I don't want that.
Okay, all right. I think we've talked about it enough. Is there a second? Okay, I'm not hearing a second. All right, so let's go ahead and call the roll, Judy, on the resolution.
Okay. Krieger.
Yes.
Stokes.
Yes.
Curlis.
No.
Hausch.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks everyone. So I think we are ready to adjourn this meeting. Again, there will be more conversation at our August 16th meeting, especially after folks have had a little bit more of a chance to process some of these details. I appreciate everyone who was able to join this meeting, give us feedback, great discussion. So with that, I'll entertain.
Brian, can I just jump in for a second, just so that folks listening can, and myself can be clear on it. This does in fact mean that the meeting for the 16th will be fully virtual.
Yes.
And we do have a BZA hearing on Wednesday, and I've already polled BZA members who are fully willing to go to a virtual meeting for that. So if that is what we'll do, and I'll get that information out online.
Yep, that's what we should do. And then, at the 16th meeting, we also need to talk about just things happening at the Bryan Center a little bit more. And I know Josue and the team will have more time to think about that, and we'll have a discussion. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, do we have a second? All right, I'll second. All those in favor signify by saying aye or raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, thanks everyone, and we'll see you next Monday.
All right, thanks everyone. Take care.